Okay, I'm back. I've made my final cut now. As you can see what I've done, I've taken my one that we were working on a while ago, and I have traced a new one. I did bring the corners out just a little bit. I thought that looked a little bit better. Other than that, it's exactly the same. As you can see, everything I did extend with my, I went in and left it the same width. I made a little bit bigger cuts there to help it fold, but I left it the same width. Brought it up just a little bit with my cigarette lighter. And then, like I said, I did bring the corners out just a little bit. I thought that made for kind of a little bit slicker look. I run that other over so far that I'm actually putting this one with the what will be third segment, which will involve the cutting the leather, gluing the leather. I'm going to try to move a little faster. I had no idea I jabbered for 17 minutes on that other one. So anyway, I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to trace this onto my leather. As you can see now, I have one where the outside's red, the inside's white. It's already getting dirty from being on my table with all my dyes and stuff, but it'll be just fine. On these, if I find myself using this a lot, I'll probably buy a piece of sheet metal, which I do for some, and actually trace this over and have it cut out onto sheet metal, which will make it much more durable than this, I believe they call it Bondtex, this paper. But anyway, this will work for the time being. Also, if it were something where I was really going to go into heavy production on it, I would probably have a clicker die made and just have these clicked out. But I just don't do that much production. The only thing that I have die stamped right now is the backs for my inside the waistband holster, because I sell a lot of those, and I like the back to look uniform so that if a guy buys 2 or 3 of them, it doesn't look like 3 different people made them. So anyway, I'm going to turn this off, put this on the leather, get some leather cut out. I'll be back on a couple times. I'll show you the leather after it's cut out. Then I'll put the liner inside of it, glue it, stitch it. I'll show you that. But I am going to try to move this a little bit faster, just so that we're not sitting here all day listening to me talk and not getting much done. I consider myself a fascinating guy, but you know, not everybody's going to. So anyway, let me shut this down. I'll get the leather cut and I'll be right back. I'm back again. What I've done, I've cut my pattern out of the black. Then I've also cut my liner, which in this case for this holster, because it's going to be stiff, not particularly tightly formed, and also probably hold several different guns. I want it to be kind of universal. I went ahead and used a lining that, I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's as thick as the outer part of the holster itself. Normally the liner would be quite a bit thinner. I've cut the the clear liner a little bit bigger. And this is one of the places where you can get away with a lot less leather if you have a clicker die. You don't have near as much waste. But like I said, this might be the only holster like this I ever make, so I'm not going to invest in a clicker die. Remember to use the finished side out and the finished side out, so that the holster has the finished side out, plus you have the smooth side of your liner. It's easier on the gun. It looks a little better too. What I'm going to do, I didn't get this cut. I did not get it cut quite like I wanted. I'm going to round a couple of corners here with the sander real fast, and then I'm going to glue these two together. Once I get these glued together with some good contact cement, I'm going to put a stitch around the outside of the entire perimeter to hold this together, and then we'll be pretty close to having a holster made. I think you'll be amazed when this goes together. Sorry, I had a yawn I had to hide. When this goes together, I think you'll be amazed at how much different it looks than just a couple of chunks of leather sitting here. Anyway, what I'll do right now, I'm going to fold this up into a holster shape, and I'm going to round this corner right here where I didn't get it cut quite right. I'm going to do that with the sander. Excuse me, there's just no beating that yawn. It was going to get there one way or the other. I'm going to get that done with the sander and then glue these together. Then I'll be back on after I get them glued. I'll probably spin the camera around and you can watch the stitching. It's not that fascinating, but A lot of people wonder what kind of a machine I had. I do not hand stitch. I do use a machine. But I don't know if you can see, this has got just a little bit of a point. I'm going to round those together. I'll hold them together like that and place them on the sander and just sand that. Again, the less you have to do after everything's put together, by far the better off you are. I'll be right back here just as soon as I get this done and get this glued together. Alright, I'm back. As you can see on my backing, I've got my contact cement. Also got my cement on the leather holster. I use more cement than I need, so that, and a little bit more leather than I need, but then that way when I put this on here, I have cement down to all the edges and don't end up with any gaps. This glued on there. As you can see, it's stiff. I mean, this is, like I say, this is definitely not a concealed carry inside the waistband type holster. This is going to be as stiff as one of the old duty belt type holsters that the cops wore, you know, when I was a little kid, like back in the 60s and maybe even before that. I was certainly a kid before that. Anyway, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go around and cut this out. This is one of my least favorite but most essential tools, which is a round knife. I've heard it called other things, but round knife's what I call it. It's extremely sharp. I used to like to drink a little wine while I was doing leather work until I realized that I was drinking wine and waving something around that was sharp enough to shave. So now I do my wine drinking and my leather working separate. But anyway, I'm going to go around, trim this, and then I will come back on. Actually, what I'm probably going to do is trim it, and then I've still got just a little bit of a corner there. I'll fold this together, make a final kind of a sand on it, and get everything where I like it. Then I'll come back on and I'll spin the camera around and do the stitching while you're watching there. But there's really not much sense in having the camera on while I'm sanding. You're not going to be able to see up close enough to see what I'm doing anyway. Plus it's loud, it's noisy, and it's boring, and it'll take about 10 or 15 minutes. So like I said, I'm going to cut this out and sand it, and then I'll bring the camera back on when I do the stitching. But as you can see, we're getting closer and closer to having us a holster. Alright, I went ahead and fired up the camera on the sander just for a second there, just to give you a rough idea of what I'm doing. I've cut my notches in now to help this bend, because it will have to bend around. Actually, it'll bend this way, but it'll have to bend around and be stitched down for the belt loop. So I didn't cut my notches in. What I've got to do now is finish all my edges. You can see I got a little round wheel here, flat wheel on this side. And I'll do this, get all the edges the best that I can get them before I put the holster together. And then I'll do a little final edge work once I do put the holster together. But first I'm going to do the edges, then I'm going to bevel them. I'll do that with a little edge tool, and then I'll go back over and do them again with the sander. I'll check in and out with you a couple of times, but the sanding process is long, drawn out, and pretty boring, so I'm not going to keep the camera on the whole time. Anyway, I'm going to fire it up and do just a little bit of it so you can see the gist of the process, and then like I said, then I'm going to shut it off. That kind of gives you an idea of what's going on, and like I say, it's going to be long, drawn out, and boring. You're looking at about 15-20 minutes worth of sand in here by the time I get done, so I'll check back in with you before I stitch. Okay, as you can see now, we've got the edges pretty well sanded. What I did, I sanded them not only flat like this, but then I use my little edge beveler here, go around, bevel the edges, then turn back around and run the beveled edges over the sanding wheel as well to give it a pretty good start on the bevel. Now what I'm going to do is change wheels. I have a Cocobolo burnishing wheel here and some water, and I'm going to wet the edges and go along with the Cocobolo burnishing wheel. Sometimes on a real fancy holster that has to look real nice, I use gum, Tragicanth or something like that to do the edges. Makes them a little slicker, but you know, it costs quite a bit more money than tap water. So what I'll be doing here is just wetting these edges and burnishing them, looking for places that don't burnish up quite smoothly. Again, once I get it going, get the edges wet a little bit, I'll show you just a little bit with the burnishing wheel. It's another very boring process, so I'm not going to spend much time on it. But when we get done, we'll actually be ready to sew the belt flap down, fold the holster around, and make a holster out of it. At that point, I'll polish it up just a little bit, and I think you'll be relatively surprised at what it looks like. I'll be back in just a minute with the burnishing.